not the best news. It's the IPCC report on how climate change is happening faster and more severe than expected. We're all gonna die.
This is fine.
This is fine. Now, this was picked up through Left Voice, who picked up Socialist Resurgence, which is I would again encourage people to sign up for their newsletter. Thank you to Daniel and Socialist Resurgence. Always looking for new publications. I don't fully endorse them, but I certainly endorse giving them a look and taking their data into account with whatever grain of salt you need to until you've deemed them to be truthful and worthy of trust in them as a source. But
right.
So the report of IPCC's working group 2 on impacts and adaptation culture, and here are the findings. Right, the report is released that the poor, indigenous, women and children, and the elderly are increasingly at risk. Wow, that sounds familiar to what happened the last couple of years. Right, especially in countries of the global south. I think that we've been talking about that, focused on that quite a bit. Right, policies followed to limit the damage are inadequate, run counter to sustainability, and deepen social inequalities. And the authors call for an inclusive approach to transform society at all levels.
Yeah,
going to be a challenge. Again, this is a decently long article, but I again think that this is really important to go through. That ecosystems are altered by climate change everywhere, and for some of them, the limits of adaptation are exceeded, and some extreme events exceed. God, that's really difficult. The averages projected for the end of the century. Species are already disappearing due to global warming, which we know, right? But here, water issues, and we're going to talk about water in the next article as well, are particularly worrying.
Water,
right? And again, this is. Go back to An Inconvenient Truth, and I believe that's 2004, would you believe? It's almost been 20 years since that movie. Maybe it's even been 20 years already. They just had an anniversary. I know they just released a sequel to it. But half the world's population experiences severe water scarcity at least once a month a year. 1 month a year. 500 million people are living in areas where the average precipitation is now at the level of rainfall that previously only occurred every 6 years. So more extremes on both ends, droughts and floods and weather events.
Yeah.
That was exactly what was predicted by the scientists. Melting mountain glaciers are causing flooding or shortages downstream. Waterborne diseases affect millions more in Africa, Asia, Central America. By the way, a good remedy for that is something that begins with an I and ends in a mectin. But I'm not going to say what that is.
Sure.
Because I know our friend Carl at Debate Me channel just got suspended for a week because he said something about that our overlords at YouTube did not like. So we're not going to do that.
Nice.
Okay, so in countries highly vulnerable to global warming, where over 3 billion people live, mortality due to floods, droughts, storms, 15 times higher than elsewhere on Earth. Ouch. Several phenomena linked to global warming, heat, cold, dust, ozone, fine particles, allergens, promote chronic diseases, the respiratory tract, right? And that doesn't even...
Tropospheric ozone, specifically, right. But yeah.
Tropospheric ozone. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Mr. Science.
Yep. You're welcome.
I'm not hearing any sound effects like, what the F?
Those are coming.
Good.
I've been waiting.
We need them for this one.
Yeah.
So climate change, of course, is a major driver of migration and displacement. So where our unwillingness or lack of ability to do anything about that is also causing refugees worldwide. And again, 20 million people have been forced to move every year due to extreme weather events, according to this, since 2008. Okay.
Yeah.
Projections are even more worrying than the findings. Can be summed up in a few words: escalation of threats. And again, we were always talking about 2 degrees Celsius. Nice. It's the aliens. The aliens. Actually, the aliens may be able to save us with their technology.
Aliens. Hopefully.
At 4 degrees Celsius of global warming, the frequency of fires will increase, for example, by 50 to 70%. Changes in ocean water stratification will reduce nutrient fluxes. It's bad. Yeah,
Is bad.
9% extinction is more than 1,000 times the natural rate of species extinction, and that's what happens at 3 degrees Celsius increase, and we're like already pegged to go like more than 4, I believe. So, yeah, and again, this was again predicted by our friend Al Gore. The water issue will become acute in terms of sustainability. Under the median scenarios by 2100, high mountain glaciers will disappear by 50% in Asia. Again, and at 2.5%, 55 to 68% of commercially exploited freshwater fish species in Africa will be at risk of extinction. I mean, like,
what?
This is
the fuck?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree, Jimmy. But the consequences for health are in line with and sharpened by the degradation and destruction of health systems. Okay, in a medium scenario, this number would increase by 250,000 a year in 2050. That's the annual number of climate deaths. Jeez. And we were talking about COVID, and Medicare for All kills 64,000 people a year. This is 250,000 people worldwide due to climate.
This is hurricanes, storms. Species die off, like
everything. Dehydration.
It's everything. Yeah, it's literally the world's dying. It's what? Yes, the world's on fire.
Again.
Yeah.
A somewhat long article. Get scientific. Okay. Again, the IPCC report obviously does not provide a social strategy for dealing with capitalist climate catastrophe, but the general tone is one of good intentions and pious wishes for the inclusion of all social actors. So it's like they're alerting us to a problem. Like, guys, you better do something about this. Like, we don't know exactly what, but this is really bad, and we should probably be doing something. And again, we're not really sharp enough or astute enough and have the money to implement to know what exactly that is, but social movement activists will find two things useful in their right: a scientific confirmation of the extreme gravity of the impacts of global warming, and a rigorous demonstration of the systemic injustice of climate policies. Well, thanks for another one.
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
Oof.
Pretty much.
It's brutal.
It's bad.
This guy wrote a heck of an article. Want to give them a shout out, and we'll try to reach out and see if there's any more color or information they can provide beyond what they gave in the article. So good stuff. Again, this will be in the show notes. You'll be able to get a link to it later on. So we've got another climate story here, and it's from Erin Brockovich, and we were talking about water. All right.
Yeah. What were you talking? What were we talking about?
Erin Brockovich and water.
What? There you go. Yeah,
water.
Yeah. I welcome the New Jersey.
We're gonna do the water.
On the,
We're gonna have some water. This is the way I always heard it. The way I always knew it to be. Was water. And then I was told, well, that sounds really New York, New Jersey, and everybody else says water.
WURDER. Water.
That just sounds weird coming out of my mouth still after all these years. So a 50-year debate defining what exactly are U.S. waters. Which waterways qualify for federal oversight? Would you believe that we are still waiting to find out? So this is fascinating stuff. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear arguments this fall in the case of Sackett v. Environmental Protection Agency, which once again tries to define waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act. Oh, man, they're going to make me say water like 800 times now. I love it.
Yeah.
In order to understand the significance, you first have to understand the CWA. Maybe one of these days I'll actually get a chance to interview Erin Brockovich. That would be absolutely fascinating for the podcast.
Sure.
Okay, so a little bit of a history of the CWA. In 1972, they were passed to protect large bodies of water, such as streams and rivers and bays, from being destroyed by things like sewage and dumping effectively. and chemicals. And then the Clean Water Act prohibited the discharge of any pollutant by any person without a permit into navigable waters. Well, what exactly does that mean?
Groundwater not being included so that fracking is okay. Is that what I'm... Well, is that what's coming?
That's part of it. Yep. It gave the EPA the authority to set water quality standards. All right. Again, both the U.S. EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers are responsible for enforcing the Act's provisions. So it's not just the EPA. What is navigable waters, which Congress simply defined as waters of the United States? All waters are navigable.
Well, it's also, it's the inland river system specifically, and Tim Tom Bigby and the Mississippi, and yep. This is my pop's expertise here. He deals with the ACOE often, and the Coast Guard.
There you go.
But yeah.
So originally, it was a strong law to help regulate water pollution. It gave them the authority to set water quality standards and implement pollution control programs. Funded the construction of more sewage treatment plants and even recognized the need to address non-point source pollution from ag sources like fertilizers and pesticides, along with urban runoff. This is all really important stuff. I mean, look, we need clean water to drink. It's one of the essential things that there are, and I think that we have taken that for granted kind of our whole lives, unless you live in Flint, of course.
Well, it's also who enforces a lot of this stuff. It's the people on the water, pretty much, who see it, right? They have to see it, report it, and if the company hates if you do that, right? There's your company, because you're usually going to be working, because who's in those waterways? You're not going to get pleasure craft up into those areas where they're doing this kind of stuff, So, but yeah.
So like she says, good laws can be written, but they can be hard to follow, right? But here, look at this. Between 2004 and 2009, just a 5-year span, the act was violated more than 500,000 times, and most of the big polluters evaded any kind of punishment. So, isn't the law meant to protect us? How can these violations continue? Sadly, the courts left us hanging for many years. And once in a while, they'll issue a big judgment, and everyone will kind of get their back up. But in the end, they run away with the profits, and year after year after year after year. Shareholders have no liability. The people in these companies move on to other organizations. They're never held criminally liable for any of it. All right. Barack Obama, with help from EPA, finalized the Clean Water Rule to help clear up the confusion, and it clarified that smaller, more isolated waters like streams and lands could fall under federal authority, right? So, and then the rule never really went into effect because of a lawsuit, and then Trump vowed to promote clean water, but then he put Scott Pruitt in charge of the EPA, an oil man, and then they narrowed the scope of the Clean Water Rule, and all their donors bought them off, and they were focused on tax cuts, and they didn't really care about other than paying lip service to clean water. And you've got the Small Business Administration was, they had that was Linda McMahon, but they had billionaires and oligarchs all over the place. You had Wilbur Ross, and there was no way anything was going to get done environmentally in the Trump administration. And his rule was that you had to eliminate a regulation for every one that you created, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah. So again, he signed an executive order instructing them to review and rewrite the Clean Water Rule, reassess whether it's consistent with promoting economic growth, and it wasn't enough to reverse the law. But on October 22nd, 2019, they published a final rule repealing the 2015 Clean Water Rule and restoring the prior regulatory text. So this unsubstantiated action is illegal and will certainly be challenged in court, which is what they said. But yeah, that's been 3 years since then, and since the 2015 Act, 7 years.
Yeah.
And then again, this is what's at stake. Please go and read this article and support Erin Brockovich. Give her a like. Subscribe for free. You don't have to pay for her Substack. You can support it with a monthly or annual donation. But I did want to go through this and let everyone know that there is a lawsuit that's going to be coming about fracking again, and about clean water, and it's Sackett versus EPA, defining exactly what the waters of the United States are, and that's important as far as what's being regulated and what's, and who's being held accountable for pollutants. So, great stuff. Again, Erin Brockovich. You ever see the movie? They're called boobs, Ed, as the article down here very famously says. They're called boobs, Ed, because Julia Roberts played her in the movie.